Hello. It has been an exciting few days, hasn't it? Right now, currently, white protesters, some of them reportedly armed, are storming Washington, D.C. to protest a valid election with our sitting president for another 2 weeks, with our sitting president egging them on. We're going to talk about this in a separate video and post because I think it's really important that we really look at what's happening here and how subversion of democracy is being painted as a distorted sort of patriotism. But for now, let's turn our attention to Georgia. This is Lace on the Race, where we take a look at propositions, legislations, and individual candidates that affect our North Star. And frankly, they all do. It is important to be involved in both electoral and grassroots politics, and we will give the usual disclaimer that I was giving all during the presidential cycle. Lace on Race is not a partisan organization. We take no specific position on individual parties. We can and do point out where the ethos and the platforms of various parties and the people who run under those respective banners stand on issues of racial justice and equity. There are people who have asked if it's possible to hold convictions of racial equity and justice while at the same time supporting a platform that does not. And I'm going to come back to that final bullet point at the end of this discussion. But for now, it is very clear that while we do have very strong stance on issues of racial justice and social justice and equity, that we are neither promoting nor are we denying any particular party. We can and will say what we think about the various platforms, and we will leave the discernment to you. Going on to Georgia. If you're in Georgia right now and you see a black or brown person, whether or not you're white or black or brown, buy a latte for them, or a beer, or a lobster dinner, or a Camry. Yet again, it has been black and brown people who saved a close race and who saved democracy. Both of the candidates that were running, and one of whom conceded defeat, the other one, it's still a close call, but it looks good, have not only been in direct opposition to our North Star, but also in direct opposition to free and fair elections. Both of them covering themselves with Trump's flag, denying the results of the November election, and frankly, encouraging what can only be called sedition. But in any case, let's look at the good news of Georgia. The 50-state strategy is an absolute winner. For those of you who don't know what the 50-state strategy is, it was something that came up right after the 2000 election when George Bush defeated Al Gore. There were books that came out. What's the Matter with Kansas is a notable one. And one of the things that the Democrats did after sitting down long and hard, and with Stacey Abrams, we'll talk about her later, part of the mix, talked about the pros and the cons of doing one of two things. Either just conceding some states as simply unwinnable and basically putting their resources and their time and their really viable candidates elsewhere. That was a losing strategy. Democrats had done that for a bit of time. Finding places that were red, or maybe just medium red or kind of light pink going into purple or lavender. And they made choices as to where they would put their resources and where they would focus. Usually in urban areas, usually on the coasts, Basically, they gave up south of the Mason-Dixon line, and they gave up on what was, and sometimes still is, derisively called the flyover states. And as a result of that, and also the Upper Plains and parts of the Rust Belt, as a result of that, but not only a result of that, because we also have to talk about white constituents, mainly but not exclusively, white working class, and notably but also not exclusively white Catholics moving over into the Republican side of the ledger and deciding, and then Democrats deciding it's just unwinnable. So they just let that go, which is, by the way, why we've seen what has happened, or what had happened, in places like Wisconsin, Ohio, parts of Illinois, parts of Minnesota. Um, it was a bad strategy, and particularly south of the Mason-Dixon line, where giving up on a state isn't just giving up on working class and middle class white voters or disaffected Catholics. It's also giving up on the black and brown people who actually live in these regions. And one of the things that I am absolutely adamant about and participated in during the beginnings of what was the second option, the winning option, was called a 50-state strategy. Um, that was one reason that Obama won in 2008, choosing not to give up on anything, going for every vote possible, focusing as well on down ticket, both propositions and legislation, as well as down ticket candidates. Because if you can get a good down ticket candidate, they're going to show up and they're going to pull the lever the way that you want them to. But the 50-state strategy was amazing. It basically said that the Democrats were going to go for every single vote. And that meant every single state, every single municipality, every single precinct. In 2005, I was privileged to be communications director for Alliance for Better California here in San Diego. And one of the things that we did, and we had been doing it before from the time of Al Gore and George Bush, was to decide that we were not going to give up on pockets of San Diego County. That is one reason why inner ring suburbs such as La Mesa are now reliably blue, why some parts of San Diego City that were considered either purple or light red are now reliably blue, why San Diego itself is now reliably blue. And even in places where we didn't win in 2005, it's gotten bluer and bluer and bluer in some parts of North County and in East County, El Cajon, to a point Santee, um, outlying areas such as Rancho San Diego and Jamul, up like Vista and San Marcos and parts of Escondido. It mattered. Giving up on various constituents says some really awful things, and it also leaves hanging, basically abandons people who are on our side in these districts. Even the most reliably red districts, very rarely do you see, you saw some of that this year in the presidential election, but for the most part, very rarely do you see more than 60 or 65% people voting red. What does that say about the 35 to 40% who did not? And we're talking about white people here. And what does that say to the black and brown people who vote reliably blue? When we decide that they are not worth our effort, there are black and brown people in East County, San Diego. There are black and brown people in North County, San Diego, and in Orange County, and in the high desert, and in El Centro, and every other place that Democrats kind of gave short shrift to for years, and it showed. And now taking this out to a state and regional and national level, there were places that Democrats decided not to spend in what they considered inordinate amounts of time. And then that shifted. And then that shifted, which is why Obama was able to win in 2008 and 2016. There was a relapse in going forward with Trump, but we saw the swing again. Stacey Abrams saw that trend, locked and loaded onto it, almost won Georgia. And as a matter of fact, I still think she won Georgia. And were it not for voter suppression, it would have been a slam dunk. She ran an incredible ground game. She ran an incredible air game. And not only did she talk about herself, but she also talked about those down ticket races that are absolutely so important. Stacey Abrams absolutely should have won. But guess what? She did win. And if she runs for governor in the next governor's election cycle, she's almost guaranteed to win. But she may be doing bigger or better things. But one of the things that Stacey Abrams did was she took that 50-state strategy, locked and loaded onto it in Georgia. And it took time. It was not one election cycle or two election cycles or even three election cycles. But her running that game, getting people to partner with her, finding good candidates in those tickets. The first African American post-Reconstruction senator, yay. The first Jewish American senator in Georgia, yay. Getting good candidates that basically are in amazing alignment with our own North Star. Persuading them to run and persuading them that they could win, that this wasn't just a placeholder, but you could win this thing because you got to believe you can win. This was absolutely amazing. Stacey Abrams is the architect of the modern day 50-state strategy. The playbook that she has written for the state of Georgia should be photocopied and mailed to every potential candidate, every single Democratic national office in every municipality. We can win. So, parties and individuals who are in alignment with our North Star can absolutely win, particularly when it's executed as perfectly and as long range and as patiently as Stacey Abrams did. Here's the thing, though. Stacey Abrams works on two tracks, and we must work on two tracks as well. The first track is by mobilizing and invigorating Black and brown constituents, Black and brown potential voters, getting them through the pipeline of voting, getting them registered, getting them primed to vote, and then getting out the vote before Election Day when it comes to mail-in ballots and on Election Day itself, letting them know that voting is going to be harder for them. And that's another concept we have to talk about. Black voters in Georgia knew that there was going to be voter suppression. Black voters in Georgia knew, Black and brown voters in Georgia knew that they were going to be standing outside sometimes for 7 and 8 hours in order to cast their ballot because of regressive registrar voter policies, because of voter suppression, because of voter intimidation, and they did it anyway. For those of you for whom voting is easy for me in Lemon Grove. I had my mail-in ballot in November. I took my ballot to where they told me to take it. I dropped the ballot. I'm done. I didn't have to stand in line for 7 hours. But some people did have problems in San Diego, and they were in impacted areas. And in Georgia, almost every Black and brown area is an impacted area. But they did it. And the numbers show. Right now, as I'm scooching over to the New York Times website and pressing the refresh button and seeing what it's looking like so far, it's slow, but I do want to be able to see. Let's see. Right now, they're talking about the certification. Right now, currently, with 98% of estimated votes reported, that's the same as a few hours ago, Raphael Warnock is definitely the leader over Kelly Loeffler. Jon Ossoff is still keeping his lead, thin as it is, over David Perdue. But the chances are good that by the time we go to bed tomorrow or later this week, we are going to have two Democratic senators in Georgia. That is no small thing. It will make for a 50-50 House, and with Kamala Harris casting the deciding vote when necessary, that gives an almost bulletproof Senate to Biden, and it will make it easier to push legislation through, working on the assumption that he is going to have the courage of heart and the courage of his convictions and the integrity of the promises that he made on the campaign trail. But yes, it is a big deal. So while we're looking at that, we need to talk about the fact that white voters voted predictably badly. They voted pretty much the same way they voted in the November election. That is to say, they voted for regressive candidates. At this point, I want to read a few things that I have written over the years, as well as from Shamika Sherrill of the Sack Shack, who we have partnered with and will partner with again. What she said here is incredibly prescient, and I'm going to read hers first before I read my own. She says, "Dear white folks, I absolutely concur that Stacey Abrams is incredible, but instead of suggesting more jobs to give her, how about you committing to doing the work yourselves? How about investing the same amount of support in the Black women and organizers in your communities? This is in no way diminishing the work she and others did in Georgia. It's amazing. However, why did the hopes of 50+% of the country have to sit on the shoulders of one single Black woman? I'm just saying, many of you have defiled Stacey Abrams and are now looking to make her do even more work as a result of her success. Instead of now asking her to fix all of our other problems, you should be doing the work you can do to uplift Black women." This is a particularly relevant post that she made today, but basically it is also an echo of what I have been saying for years now, starting from the 2017 special election where Roy Moore was defeated in Alabama, again, not because of white people. I'm going to read a couple of things that I said in 2017. I had to work a little bit to find them, but here they are. The first thing that I said, it was back in the days when I was allowing myself a little bit of snark. I said this December 3rd, 2017, right after the special election. "White people doing social justice work are going to have to do some collective soul searching as we move into 2018. They need to decide why exactly it is they are doing it, because how that question is answered will determine if you all can be trusted to do the heavy lifting required for sustainable change and effective effort in the next years to come. If it's just a hobby, maybe you just need to peruse the Isles of Michael, find a glue gun and a bedazzler, and get it all out of your system. A coloring book and one of those cool sets of 100 markers should keep you busy, and the rest of us can work in peace and without distraction. Because of your superficial, fragile, ghosting at the slightest perceived offense, inability to hear and heed the words of people of color, and arrogant, aggressive insisting on your own agendas, strategies, timelines, and giving primacy to your own voices, while jamming gags in the mouths of people of color are annoying, but almost bearable now. So next year, when there are districts to flip, Nazis to confront, and communities to organize, it will be less bearable. White hobbyists will derail the real work that needs to be done in midterms and sabotage coalition building and collaboration that will be crucial as we wrest control of our communities and our countries. We, and by that I mean y'all white people, gotta do better. Fully a year later, I am saying the same things to the same white people. Fully a year later, they are disrespecting communities of color and crying white tears when they are confronted. Fully a year later, they abandon causes, people, and convictions when they feel they clash with their privilege and supremacy. As we saw this month, only 3 days in, this stuff is real. The work will only get harder and more intense. White hobbyists, find your inner crafter and stand down. Those of you ready to rumble into 2018, saddle up. Get fed. Read the words of brown and Black women who have been leading the charge for this last year. Listen to them. Follow their direction like you should have before 2016's election. do your internal work, because your lack of doing so shows up in your problematic behaviors. My liberation, our liberation, cannot rest in the hands of dilettantes. That was edited and revised, and it will be edited and revised again to reflect 3 years later in 2021. But the words are absolutely as prescient and as relevant as they were in 2017. White people are still basically displaying the same voting behaviors, and you should be as upset and as angry and as galvanized as I am that we have not seen better behavior from 55% of white compatriots. Speaking of that special election in 2017, I also wrote this. This was when I was just beginning Lace on Race, before it became an official website, and I was just doing freelancing and working for 2 other organizations where I did freelance work, but under their umbrella. This is what I wrote. First and foremost, thank Black women. Believe Black women. Follow the lead of Black women. Vote like Black women. Secondly, we got to talk about white women. We can't try to corral off Alabama like it's under some kind of quarantine and treat it like an outlier. It isn't. It's smack in the middle of the curve. White women voted like they always do. And get abortion out of your mouths. They voted for white supremacy. Wait for it, the fully 2/3 of white women who voted for a racist who was also a pedophile, who was also a racist, would blanch at the thought of being called racist themselves. And in the New South, they probably would almost believe it. But they voted for white supremacy nonetheless, above their children, above themselves. And in that sense, they are no different than all those white women who voted against themselves last year. The difference, though, is that in some states, there will not be enough Black women to save the day for you. Enter the map below. Black people are, on our best day, about 13% of the country, but that does not tell the entire story. We are concentrated in certain parts of the country, certain states, certain cities. We are at about 25% of Alabama overrepresented in that state, and therefore can, and most certainly did, influence that election. Again, you're welcome. I simply can't say that enough. But because there are many places in this nation that consciously made it their business since the Emancipation Proclamation to ensure that Black folk were not welcome in their cities, states, entire regions, and municipalities, they don't and won't have enough Black people to do their heavy lifting come November 2018. I know that what with Oprah and Kanye and that guy on the Old Spice ads, we seem ubiquitous. But we're not really. And we can't be bussed in to save your electoral asses and then shipped back into redline ghettos once you're finished with us. In some places, white people, you will have to save yourselves. The places that Obama secured that Trump managed to flip, Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, have Black people concentrated in urban areas, but it's the rural areas that delivered those states to Trump. And for a moment, let's forget south of the Mason-Dixon. For the sake of this video, let's forget Alabama in 2017, and let's forget Georgia for the moment right now. There are wide swaths of the country, most of the Midwest, almost all of the Plain States, where Black people are an anomaly, and where Trump won in some places quite handily. Because of decades, centuries really, of determined unwelcome, you're not going to find a lot of Black people in those places. And much as we'd like to, we can't phone it in from Inglewood. So you will have to do the work yourselves. You will have to find ways to be creative about the curious brand of white supremacy that pervades these regions, probably exactly where you live, where sizable numbers of white people never even see Black people on the regular outside basic cable, but are still willing to vote against them. You will have to do your own analyses, construct your own models, talk to and understand your own people. We cannot do it all for you. It is on you to encourage, convince, entice, and cajole your skin folks in those states and regions and municipalities you call home to gather their bravery and vote like Black women. I promise you, your states, your cities, your suburbs, your very block will be the better for it. Again, all of that is every bit as true in 2020 as it was in 2017. That should concern you grateful. That should concern you greatly. And also what I was talking about, white people talking to themselves, white people doing their own analyses, also needs to be tempered with the North Star, because we've seen what happens when white people turn the focus onto themselves, but without the concomitant inner work and the concomitant racial dynamic realities and analyses that are absolutely crucial before you, in a vacuum, look at white voters. We see this in Hillbilly Elegy, and we've seen this since 2000. What's the matter with Kansas? Every single election, the spotlight is turned not on the Black and brown people that are winning these elections, that are just assumed to be mindless. We just close our eyes and vote, or since we don't really have that much up here, we just vote the way white people tell us to, which is why we are, even within the Democratic Party, ignored and condescended to. But when we're looking at these white people that did not vote the way white progressive pundits would have them, they are trying to find ways to figure out why that indeed happened. And it turns out, well, we want to be compassionate. We want to try to understand them. And what it turns out is that it's enabling. And they want to make sure that they can do everything they can to get voters to vote in a certain way without looking at the real dynamics, white supremacy, that continues to have them vote the way they do. We can look at what happened in Kentucky, for instance. We can look at why everyone talks about how can we have compassion and give primacy to and acknowledge and accommodate white working class and poor voters who consistently vote against themselves, because it must be remembered that voting like Black women lifts all boats. Voting the way Black women do also helps white people. In fact, it's going to help white people more. That's always true, because until we have faces, any legislative or policy debate is going to always, always put primacy on white people. We know this. Black women know this, but we also know that the way that we are voting, while it helps white people more, will also help our own people. So while people were trying to accommodate, dare I say, pander to white, rural, and poor and working class voters, meanwhile, there is an entire constituency that is growing daily and will soon be more than 50% of the American populace that are just assumed that basically we don't have to worry about this constituency, and we certainly don't have to deliver for them after an election. Black and brown voters once again saved Georgia from itself. There is deep thinking to be done here. Deep thinking to be done here. Real wrestling and coming to terms with the fact that the people that America as a country, the people that America hates the most, Black and brown people, that the people that society hates the most are the ones that actually steps up the most and does the most to live up to our American ideals, to make them less a PR campaign and less of a myth and more of a reality. White people as a group don't do that. We do. And you need to learn to vote like us. Right now, it's looking good in Georgia, just like it was, but it's a nail biter. It's a nail biter. We still don't know about the Perdue Ossoff race. But one of the things that people wanted me to be able to see was exit polling. Well, the thing about exit polling is that white people lie. White people lie a lot about exit polling. And that's absolutely true. One of our community members came up with a uh, Google Doc that talked about what if only white people voted um, for Trump in 2020. She used exit polling, and so the numbers look better than, in my view, that they are. There are places where, when we are looking and we see, oh, well, white people are doing better, and then you actually break it out, not so much. What we need to also be looking at is breaking it out with brown and black people if only black people voted. It's almost, and I actually have seen infographics on that. When it comes to black and Latino voters, it's practically an entirely blue map. Because of that, we're reliable voters. White people think we're mindless voters, but we're considered reliable voters. And so we don't really have to think about them that much. I would strongly suggest that that stops, and stops soon, because we don't want to get too giddy about the first black post-Reconstruction senator. And don't point fingers only south of the Mason-Dixon line. Don't do side eye and look like this. Well, it's about time Georgia got it right. Maybe those southern states like Alabama and Mississippi and South Carolina and Louisiana and my home state, Arkansas, maybe they'll start getting it right too. Well, slow your roll. Slow your roll. Look at your own Senate delegations. The chances are overwhelming that they're white, probably white males. There is not one single state, not one, with an equitable distribution of black and brown congressional delegations. The overwhelming number of governors are white, as are most. Hawaii might be an exception state, as are most state houses, although Hawaii might be an exception. And let's turn it to ourselves. Let's locate ourselves in this entire landscape. What has happened since 2008 and then since 2016 and up to now? How did you do in getting black and brown and even white candidates who would be in alignment with our North Star into office? How many of the 10,000 of you phone banked? How many knocked doors? How many of you contributed? How many of you talked to your family, friends, and neighbors about the specifics and the crucial nature of moving black and brown people into elective office? Finally, while this election is indeed crucial, it is by no means complete. The sounds that you're hearing are the notifications in my leadership chat where they are talking about the armed insurrection in Washington going on right now. Right now. People who are so afraid of change and so clinging to their notions of supremacy and primacy that they are willing to subvert and come to the bleeding edge of treason in order to maintain what they have. We'll talk about that later, but it's important. And that absolutely tells us that what we're doing here is still needed. It would be needed if both senators turn blue in Georgia. It's needed if we're able to consolidate gains in 2022. It's absolutely important now, regardless of who won. The absolute need to do the work that we do is still absolutely essential. Because, like I said, we can't all save you. In the same way that there is no way, even if I scheduled a 15-minute coffee with each of you 24/7 for the next 20 years, like with no bathroom breaks, I would not be able to reach every one of you. I would not be able to sit down with every one of you. And so the 13% of the Black populace also can't have coffee with each and every one of you. You're going to have to learn to do this work crucially You're going to have to learn to do it well, better than you've done, better than you've done, with better analyses than you've been doing. You need to rip pages out of our playbooks with attribution to us. Thank you very much. And do this sort of work so that we are not having nail biters like we have had. Um, I am going to end this video now so that I can take a good look at what's going on in Washington and perhaps post up another video. This is important work that we're doing. Georgia is crucial. It is not complete. So the takeaways from this video. Georgia's important, not complete. Look at your own state houses. Look at your own Senate and congressional delegations. Start figuring out what you're going to do now in the present day, since all of this seems to be over. Because the Electoral College will indeed be certified today. We know this, even with the incredibly ill-fated and unfortunate people outside Washington right now. We are going to be living in different circumstances in 2 weeks. But that's not enough, and we all know that. So it is time to redouble our efforts. It's time to start putting pedal to the metal now, start looking at ground game now for 2022 and 2024, and make the North Star your absolute focus. Is the peanut butter sandwich I'm eating in service to our North Star? That's how we win. That's how we change, both not just in legislative, but also in grassroots arenas. That's how we change our friends, our families, our neighbors, our coworkers, and that with the internal work married, welded to external praxis. That is how we change ourselves. I want each and every one of the 10,000 of us in the Lace on Race community to be absolutely different people in 2022. More savvy, more confident, better able to weather storms, better able to get the message out there, because this is a snapshot in time. That's what Georgia is. We're looking at big picture, and we're looking at down the road. I always look west when I do these videos, which means I always have a really good look at the orange tree, that straggly orange tree that, despite everything, still keeps bearing fruit. And so must you be. We can't depend on anyone else. And you can't depend on Black and brown people to do the work for you. You need to start learning how to do it well and competently. And without the way Lynn does it, taking from us and calling it a day. Teachability, humility, pedal to the metal. Today, tomorrow, next week, for years to come. This is Lace on the Race. And now I'm going to start doing what I'm supposed to do for every video now that we're on YouTube. If you like what you read or what you just heard, and you like what you read on Lace on Race, subscribe. Click the link below. Make sure that you go to the Lace on Race Cafe, laceonrace.com, for the Lace on Race homepage itself, and also laceonrace.com/groups. As well, make sure that you're visiting our Facebook page. I care less whether or not you like or subscribe there, but that's the entire Lace on Race universe. I want you geared up and equipped to do this work, and I want to do it with you together. Subscribe. Subscribe.